Good evening, and once again, it's time for my Sunday night look back at where we've been and look ahead of where we're going. And I think the best thing I can say about the entire discussion and everything I saw in week two is that it proved to me that week one wasn't an accident. That this group is very, very active, very lively, very involved, and very engaged. Couldn't be happier with what I'm seeing. And it is one of those times where some of the discussions, I try to come in and maybe ask some follow up questions, but you are really proving to be a group that asks its own questions of itself, does some extra work, everything I think we could want out of a discussion in this material. So it's just very gratifying for me to see it. And I thought the discussions were very good when we look at things like the questions that I asked may have sounded, and some of you alluded to that, they sounded a little odd at first, asking about profit regulation. You know, that's something if you say in typically in our business climate and our business methods, our society, regulating profits, it's almost like, you know, the only industry you ever hear that in is a public utility. The electric company, you know, the gas company. Well, maybe we do regulate those profits, but they're different. They're monopolies, uh, and protected monopolies, public utilities. And I even thought of actually asking that question: is it, maybe should we somehow look at sport and treat it in some senses as a public utility? Because we certainly understand how important it can be to a community. And we've asked questions about that. We'll ask more about that. And you read some of the comments in some of the more general things back in week one of when we talk about sport economics and the whole economic concepts behind sport and communities, etc. We have a whole unit later on really devoted to that. And in fact, this week we're going to be moving beyond that to another question. So, but back up, I thought the quality, and again, I said I may not comment directly or respond to every post, but I do read them all. It was great. It was really good. So there was some healthy gentlemanly disagreements, which I thought were great. I thought there were comments that back and forth where people were actually pulling more and more out, and you know, we started to look ahead a little bit. And by that I mean you can see how this question of profit regulation and growth almost comes into the whole competitive idea. And in about a week or two, we're going to be starting looking at the concept of competitive balance from almost the on the field perspective, and how does that affect the off the field perspective. And some of you have started to reference that. So I would like you to hold on to a lot of the thoughts that you had in this week. And when we get to that competitive balance section, it's time for us to use them again. Now, this week is going to be very much an outgrowth of the first set of questions we did. This week we tend to look at some of the legal aspects, and from a financial point of view, the question of monopoly, the question of antitrust, and of those of you who may or may not be familiar with that term, but that's the government regulation of monopolies. You remember from your economics lessons that a monopoly is a sole supplier, right? And I think we have some interesting questions this week. So I want you to go back, and when you go through the material this week, look at it really closely. Think like an economist. You're going to be looking at things about monopoly. You're going to look at antitrust law. You're going to look at labor relations. You're going to look at things like have some commentary on the Players Association. We see that we've had some rough times in some sports in the last few years. And once again, there was a reference over late in the summer where one of the player representatives, or maybe it was one of the, it wasn't the executive director, but maybe the player representative of one of the teams in the NFL started saying, you know, I'm going to have to talk to the younger players about saving up some money because things could get rocky again. These are important issues because the player contracts, that most of you referenced last week, they're big. A lot of issues are out there. The costs of it, as you can see, of running a team are huge. How do we keep this How do we keep this juggernaut going? We've often said, it's billionaires versus millionaires, but nobody wants to give up that what seemingly ever growing pie. They don't want to give their slice of that pie up. They want their slice to be even bigger. Well, how can you do that? It doesn't happen if the whole pie doesn't get bigger. And that's what we're seeing here. So really kind of read through these things carefully. And then we have just one discussion question this week. But I think on its surface, just like some of the others, it seems almost silly until you really think about it. And there are some legal precedents. The whole idea of antitrust exemptions started with baseball a long time ago. And to get around that, baseball was actually declared by a congressional exemption not to be a business, but a public exhibition. I think that's the terminology they used. That allowed baseball, and then by extension, other major sports since then, to be viewed differently than other businesses were as monopolies. So it's very interesting. And I think it's actually a little bit more interesting than it may seem on the surface. So if you think we're going to spend this week looking at legal documents and everything, I've tried to get away from that. Tried to give you some articles that actually tell it to you in a more interesting way. Listen to some of the speakers about it that we have, and I think you'll find it an interesting point. Couple administrative notes. I noticed that in the course copying process, you didn't get a rubric for the discussion boards. So I apologize for that. I've also made sure that it is included. So this will give you in the course information, you can go in and look at a rubric which shows you how we score discussion boards across the business school, and this will give you guideposts for your participation. By the way, the participation has been excellent, and I think you're just going to find things very easy. But if there's any question in your mind as to what you should be doing, make sure you refer back to that rubric, and it's in the course information section. I think the rest of the things are going along well. I haven't found too many glitches and things. We did have some problems in some course copying earlier on. I think we're beyond that right now, so I'm confident that everything, at least this week's material, everything that's supposed to be there is there. So that being said, thank you again for your activity. I hope you're watching these videos. I'm going to put up an announcement to go along with them. This is where I get a lot of the information across to you. So if you happen to see this one for the first time, don't forget to watch the ones that are coming. Particularly as we get into weeks 4 and 5 when I start talking about the midterm exercise. That's going to be an interesting one for you, and this is where I talk about it, and you're going to get the most instruction. So I certainly don't do this for my own health. As you can see, it's it's not to advertise some old guy sitting here in his kitchen on a Sunday evening just talking to himself. This is to be important information, important commentary on what's going on. I appreciate you doing it, and hope it works well for you. Take a look at what we have to say. Okay, if there are any questions, please email me is the best way. I try to get back to you. I was a little tardy. At least in my opinion, getting the discussion board grades done this week didn't happen until Thursday. Normally I will try to get that done by Tuesday or Wednesday. As I said earlier in an earlier message, I think the earlier I can get those things done and offer some commentary, it helps you in the next week. It's only fair. So that's it for tonight. I've had a pretty good sports day. My New York Giants won. Anytime they beat the Dallas Cowboys, it's a great day in my even by 1 point as happened today. Great day in my opinion. And on that fan-based note, which is something I'm always cautioning us against, I'll leave you for tonight. If you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you.